Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with John Rhodey, former owner and longtime employee at the Rhodey's Camera Shop. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. The shop opened 1 year. What year did the shop
1911,
open?
my grandfather opened the shop on 26th and 63rd Street.
26, okay.
Yeah, and was there for till 1921, I believe, roughly. So 10 years over there, right by the Chicago North Shore Train Depot is where it opened.
Okay, and when did you start working at the camera shop?
At 1965, when I was 13, I started doing odd jobs there.
Such as?
Unloading trucks, shipments, cleaning, emptying garbage cans, different things. Little, just tidying up the place a little bit. Then by the time I was 15, then I actually started working behind the counter and waiting on customers and things like that.
Were you always interested in photography?
I had an interest, but not over, the board of, like, it wasn't a big hobby of mine, no.
Okay, so when you started working there, your father was your
my father and my grandfather and my aunt at the time worked there also. They all showed me the ins and outs of, how to use a camera, a movie camera, projectors, all of it.
Okay. So, did you have to apply for a job, or did you talk to your dad about how this would?
No, my dad just said, hey, how about coming down and helping us out? As simple as that. And, I was glad to make a few dollars, and he was glad to get some work accomplished, and he could count on me of being there. When I said I'd be there, I was there.
And how long did you then work and own? When did you become an owner of the shop?
An actual owner when I was roughly 30 years old, so about 1982. Okay. At about 1971, I had been out of high school for 1 year, and I basically took over managing the store at that time at 19 years old.
So basically day-to-day operations person?
Pretty much everything. My dad was still involved in the business, but more, I will say, part-time.
Okay. And then as being the owner in 1982, you owned the shop, worked there how long?
I worked there until 2013 when I sold the business then to two of my employees, one had been with me about 30 years and the other about 10. And I felt certainly that they could, handle, buying the place. I made them a attractive offer, let's say.
Okay.
So they could easily be able to afford it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I imagine a lot has changed over the years. When your grandfather started the business, what did it do? What were the services provided? Or
Right, back in 1911, my grandfather had a photo studio and also a small camera shop that sold, some of the new latest Kodak cameras at the time, and film and so forth. And then he worked for Jeffrey Motors as a freelance photographer for them. He did some freelancing for the Simmons Mattress Company. And then when those came to an end, he just, made the camera store bigger, more products, and still did photography for a while. And then it went into just all camera store related things.
Okay, so Back in 1911, maybe 10 years later and a little beyond that, what were the supplies that Rhodey's camera shop provided for customers?
Film, flash bulbs, cameras, of course, both movie-type cameras and still. They also had people who did their own dark rooms were able to buy like chemicals and photographic paper and that kind of thing.
Okay, so this lasted until...
Hey, we sold that kind of products for the whole 109 years. Yeah.
And what about delivery? Did your grandfather sell to retail businesses?
Yeah,
or?
we, back in then, I don't know exactly what year it started, but I'm going to say the late 20s, started selling to mom and pa drugstores, and I would call them convenience stores today, small grocery stores, and we would sell them film flash bulbs to those places. We had 80 different mom and pop places that we sold to.
Okay, tell me a little bit about flash bulbs. That seemed like a long time ago.
Yes, like I mentioned too, when I started in '65, probably I would say every 2 to 3 weeks we would get in 1,300 cases of flash bulbs. And we'd know ahead of time they're coming. I'd come home from school and the truck would come and spend hours just unloading those, put them into the basement of the store. And every time somebody took an indoor photo, back then, they had to use a flash bulb.
Now, was there only one type of flash bulb, or were...
No, there were several sizes. Yeah, depending on the cameras and, but there was, I'd say, just right offhand, I can think of about 5 different sizes of flash bulbs.
Okay, so today I take a camera with an iPhone or Android phone, and there's a built-in flash, and
Right.
that goes off. In the back when flash bulbs were used and you took a photo, you really saw the light. Is that
Yes, right. Yeah, it was quite impressive, the flash off of them. Just a little story of my grandfather did the opening of the main street. There's a bridge from where our city hall is now, right over the harbor, and somebody was going to get married. They were just opening the bridge. And this was in the teens. He used so much flash powder, and they didn't have flash bulbs at the time, and he got a picture of all these people on the bridge, and the people getting married, and he used so much flash powder he fell over. So it was pretty cool. He told me the story several times.
Oh, okay. He didn't get
And
it.
I had the picture, of this bridge and all the people on it. Unfortunately, it got burned up in fire in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you have any training whatsoever as far as the photo business, camera?
All the photo training I had was just trial and error, learning from my parents, and grandfather and aunt, and just learning from them and just being around it, you just learn. I started after high school, went to Gateway for 1 semester, taking a marketing course, to run a business, and never did complete that first semester because I got into the Army National Guard in that time, and before the semester was over, I had to go to basic training.
Okay. Now, your dad took over after your grandfather.
Yeah.
When was that?
Just like myself, he worked, from when he was a young person. Mm-hmm. After high school, we would develop. We had a black and white photo lab in my grandpa's basement of his home, and that was on 23rd Avenue off of Roosevelt. And he came home from school and just developed pictures from when he got off of school till he went to bed at night. And interesting story how we did it. We had so much incoming film to develop was we used the Kappas Bakery delivery trucks to pick up these rolls of film. When they would go deliver bread to some of the establishments, we would also have a film drop at those same places, and people could bring their film in, we'd pick it up and campus would bring it back to us, and we'd turn it around the next day.
Can you describe the photo processing process, if you would? You know, you get a roll of film and...
You get a roll of film, you know, black, white, and color, didn't matter either way, but back in what we're talking about now, black and white film, you would have 3 different chemicals to use. First, you'd have a developer, then you'd have a solution called a stop bath. It would stop the action of the developer.
So the first piece was bringing out the image.
Right, on
Okay.
the negative.
Okay.
And then you'd stop that action and with a stop bath, and then from there you would use a fixer, and that would fix it. You know, they called it a fixer. Basically, it hardened the emulsion on the film, and it stopped everything, and it, you know, and then you'd wash it and hang it up to dry.
And then?
From then you have your negative. Then you would take it into either a standalone printer, which would just make like contact prints of the size of your film, or if you wanted it bigger than that, you would use an enlarger and enlarge them to whatever size.
Would you then you would do a different process, I assume, to print?
Yeah, so then now you have paper that you'd put in an easel. You'd put your negative into the enlarger. It would make the image onto the paper. You do this all in the dark. And then you would take that paper and again into a developer, a stop and a fix, the same way the film was.
A long process.
A long process to do this, absolutely.
Okay. Well, you said you did it in the dark, but there really was
You had
light?
you had a safe light, yeah. Not for film processing. It was pretty much all totally dark. But for the paper, you could have what they used, an OC filter, and it was give you a little bit of a light so you could kind of see what you're doing in there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, your grandfather started processing film.
Yes.
And when did he do that? And
That was somewhere in the 1920s. I don't have an exact date, but somewhere in the 20s, and continued that into the 50s. Yeah.
This was black and white only.
Black
That's
and white
all it
only.
was.
Yeah. And then by the early 60s, it just was hard to do and keep up with the demand, and we had other services that would come and pick up from us at the camera store, you know, and they would do the developing, bring it back the next day. You know, Eastman Kodak Company was one, and they had their own labs in Chicago, and they had delivery route that would come every day and pick up.
Okay. Then, how did this process of change in the camera shop continue? I mean, you took over as a manager, operations director.
Right.
And your father was still in the business.
He was still in the business. He was doing mainly outside sales from when I took over in 71 until 83 when I bought it. So he was doing outside sales. He would go to mom and pop studios and some of these drugstores we talked about earlier, and had all these, he was doing all the outside sales. And then I was handling the store itself, and it just worked out real well. Then later, when he basically gave that up to me totally, then I did outside sales also.
How far did you do outside sales? How far did your dad go?
Rice Lake, Wisconsin was probably the furthest north.
Which is about how many miles away?
You know that? I would say it's got to be 350 maybe.
A long trip for
Long
outside
trip.
sales?
Yeah. And we had a lot of accounts in, you know, Beloit, Monroe, Dodgeville, Milwaukee, a lot of Racine accounts.
Well, some of these trips you didn't like make it home at night.
No, he stayed away. The one week he would stay away 3 nights, and the following week he'd be 2 nights gone.
Okay, what changes, when did color developing come into?
It came in place in the 60s, early 60s, and then, that got to be the big thing, and that's why we kind of got out of black and white. Nobody wanted black and white anymore.
Okay, so you always sold cameras and film?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then any technology that changed the way people took photos or went from the Instamatic type cameras?
Yeah, in '76, Canon came out with the first automatic exposure single lens reflex camera. 35 millimeter, it had interchangeable lenses, and this was really a big thing for the photo industry. Every mother wanted to have a camera like that to take pictures of the kids' birthdays, and the dads wanted them to take on fishing trips, and it just got to be, this is what everybody wanted to have, and it was a good thing for us. There wasn't a lot of competition like later in the years, but in about '76, there was basically just camera stores selling those things. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the Best Buys, and they didn't have some of these other stores.
Okay, so you started doing color printing then, a little later after that.
Yeah, and then, yes, in 1983, we got into color printing. We had the first one-hour photo lab in the city of Kenosha, and we didn't have any competition until 1990. And at that time, Walgreens and a few others, got into doing the same thing.
Okay, and did you do any expansion as the colored printing came in and the single reflex lens cameras?
We did do some expansion as far as we got some commercial customers. We did all the stuff for all the police departments, both Racine and Kenosha, Lake County, Illinois, and Pleasant Prairie. We did all the police work for them. American Motors at the time had their proving grounds out in Burlington, Wisconsin. All the test crashes and stuff. We did all the printing for, everything was done on film. There was no digital then, of course. So we did all the printing of all their test crashes. And Western Printing, for instance, in Racine. Every time they came out with a new golden book, they'd have to have pictures of that for all their salesmen. Say they had 100 salesmen, they says, photograph the cover of this golden book, and then we want 100 copies of it for all our salesmen. And, different commercial applications like that. The J.I. Case Company and the Outboard Marine Company, we sold them to their technical publications department. And they had a writer, a photographer, and a mechanic working at the Case Company. They would take apart the tractor. The photographer would take pictures of how they're taking apart the tractor to make a technical manual. And then they had a writer there saying, this is when you take this part apart. They explained it to make their technical publications. Excuse me. And, we sold them all the products for that and did their printing.
Did you do all of that out of the one shop?
Out of the one shop, yeah. We did more work out of the back door of the shop, outside the shop, than we did indoors.
Did you ever have a second location?
We did. In 1991 through 93, we had a little offshoot of our company called Photos Today, and it was in the Town and Country Shopping Center up on 75th Street. And that we just lasted for 2 years, and then we shut that down.
And the reason why you shut that down?
Profitability. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned your grandfather started a shop, and that's not the location it had been in 2020.
Right. Our three moves were, the first move in 1911 was on 26th and 63rd by the North Shore train. Then in about 1921, my grandfather built a brand new home one house off of Roosevelt Road and 23rd Avenue. And when he built the house, he made an entrance to the basement of that house so customers could come in. And so we ran that from 1921 to 1946 out of the basement of his house. And then in 1946, my dad got out of the war, and then he bought the building on Roosevelt and 22nd. And then we were there until it burnt down in the rioting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any other issues at that shop?
It would be 1954. I was 2 years old. My mom and dad, my sister and I lived upstairs at the camera shop. And there was electrical fire in the wall next to the crib I was sleeping in. And it did quite the damage. We had a huge fire. We were shut down. The store was shut down for months. Camosi Construction did the rehab of the inside. Also, they started in business in 1910, and we had all the suppliers that we used were very helpful into resupplying us, and we were back open that Christmas of 55. Yeah.
So how long was it?
So the fire happened the first week of September.
In 54.
I'm sorry, was it 54? Yeah. And then by Christmas of 54, I should say, not 55, we were back in business again.
Okay, can you describe a typical day at the office when you were the owner?
Mondays were always the busiest day, it seemed, after a weekend, especially when we had the photo lab. We'd come in first thing in the morning and we would just be writing up film, processing bags for the wedding photographers, the weekend photographers, and just kept us busy in the lab for sure. Through that whole day, we had enough film there to do for the next couple days. And but myself, every day was a little different, always having the wonderful clientele that we had that came in for years and years. We had just great customers. They were all very loyal customers. They came, week after week, year after year, back to see us. And it was a pleasure, being able to service them.
Okay. Can you describe any technological advances, any economic changes, anything that affected your business? You already mentioned this single lens reflex.
Right. Probably
cameras. One
thing that affected our business, it was, I'm going to say around 87 to 92. There's a lot of the popular photography magazines, and they would have people who would sell cameras and photo supplies out of the back of these magazines, mail order. And at some prices that were hard to compete with, And we called it gray market, and basically these were Japanese-made cameras, but they were sold to different countries that their dollar was worth more than our U.S. dollar, so they could buy it cheaper with, say, a German mark or a different type of currency, and that for quite a few years we had a real hard time being competitive just because we weren't playing it with the same, they didn't give us, we couldn't buy it only with US dollars, I guess, our products, so it was a little unfair for us, but we made it through.
Okay, what about digital?
Digital was really, and that's what we have today in today's world. So I don't know even how many camera stores even exist anymore, just because once the digital cameras came out, people stopped printing pictures. They could print them at home on their own, color copiers. And it just made it very difficult to compete. We sold digital cameras and that kind of thing, and we could print from digital media, and we had to try to find other avenues to make money, so we went into photography, and we have done sports pictures, and that certainly helped, because we could go out and do the sports teams, we could print them, we did the whole thing from the photography to the printing.
Okay. Is there any other kind of photography business, printing aspects that you were able to get into as well?
We did large format printing, where we could print banners and very large prints, up to 40 inches wide. So we got involved in that. Still did a lot of commercial printing for different commercial applications.
Would people bring in old photos and want you to?
Oh yeah, for restoration, absolutely, yeah.
Did that become a significant portion of the business?
It was a minimal. We did it, but it wasn't, dollars and cents wise, it was, probably less than 1% of our, what we did during a year.
So you mentioned you were the only color developer printer for a time before.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And magazines selling cameras, that you had struggled with. Who, over time, generally speaking, who were your competitors?
When it was just Camera Store versus Camera Store, we had Cairo Camera Store in Kenosha, and we had Maxwell's Camera Store. And so, we were all in competition with each other at the time. Maxwell's closed, I'm going to say, in the early 1980s, and so did Cairo right about that same time. It was a hard business to be in. Any business, I think, if you ask some kind of owner, nothing's easy.
Okay, so they closed. Who became your competitors then after that?
Then the Walmarts, the Kmarts, the Best Buys started coming out, and they all had, photo departments. And so those were definitely, big competition. Then, since Amazon came out, I don't know what year that was, but say the early 2000s, now you got all this type of a thing, you get door-to-door delivery on, products. You don't have any service, and people still came into our store to get the service, because they want to learn, they want to know how to use those things.
So you were also selling that experience.
Yeah, that's always been what we sold, is the service and,
the knowledge.
The knowledge, yeah.
Now, did you ever socialize much with your employees? Did you have many employees?
I had 8 employees, probably at the highest number, and we always had a really big Christmas party we did every year, and I treated all those guys and girls, like family, but I didn't do a lot of socializing, with them other than at work or, our annual Christmas party.
Do you see any of them today?
And presently I still see some of them. We have lunch a couple times a year still, so it's really nice, yeah.
Okay. Do you have any, you mentioned the Kenosha Police Department, Racine Police Department. You said that you did all the printing of their film. Mm-hmm. Did something happen where for a time you didn't, or had you always done?
We just started, I would say, in the mid-1990s doing work for the police departments. Prior to that, we sold they had their own photo lab. We sold them the products, and the equipment to set up their photo lab, and then they did it on their own. And then, like our Kenosha Police Department, for instance, they tried to go digital when digital was it wasn't ready. And that was like 1994, 1995. And they had a hard time winning any of the cases in court because the attorneys on the other side said, oh, you can manipulate this image, this and that. And they went back to using film. And then by that time, they had already closed down their own photo department. And then we did their stuff from 95 until the store burnt down.
Oh. Do you know where they're doing it today?
That I don't know.
Okay, did you ever have occasion to deal with a big box store for one reason or another?
Yes. The Shopco store here in Kenosha, they were selling these digital SLR cameras, and they didn't have, their people who worked in their photo department really didn't have the knowledge. So they weren't selling the products. So they called me up one day and said, John, how would you like to buy all our inventory? And I said, well, tell me what you got and what the price is. And we ended up making a deal, and they still had sold film and things like that, but they didn't sell the high-end cameras anymore. That was just, one store, Shopco, but
do you remember how many cameras they had to sell to you?
Oh, it was around 40. Yeah.
Pretty much all that they were selling on those cameras.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other stories you remember during the course of? People coming in and asking for some ridiculous favor or something that they wanted you to do with an old photograph that you knew you can't do that.
There were some things that were a little unethical that we just kind of stayed away from. When people would ask, just didn't want to go on that route. But there's always a lot of little stories, but nothing that's really, that sticks to me.
What would you consider the best part of your job over those many years?
My best part, this is very sincere, was just all the people I ran into, both selling outside, going outside and selling products. I got to be friends more than just, selling somebody something. And certainly all the people that came into Rhodey's camera shop, for year after year, it was just, it was wonderful to have these wonderful customers. And, just dealing with the family that I made as my employees, they were like family to me also. And that's the best part, my employees and my customers.
How do you see the future of camera shops or?
The future of the camera shop is gone.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's just not enough need, and to set up and have a lot of inventory, and with all of the online services where you can buy these big expensive cameras now, and the little bit of money you can make on them, it just wouldn't pay.
And film is
left to
the real arty people who.
And there's not enough of them. Yeah.
Okay. Over the years of being on Roosevelt Road, 22nd Avenue, did you ever consider moving from that location?
I had thought about it, and really things were going pretty good until, almost, they were just going pretty good. And I thought, why try to fix something that's not broke?
Okay. The neighborhood must have changed over time as well.
Yeah, the neighborhood certainly was getting a little
older.
Yeah, older, yeah. Let's say tired.
Declining a little bit, maybe.
Right. So, yeah.
How did you feel when the shop burned in 2020?
It was a terrible evening, I'll tell you that. I wasn't running the business anymore.
Well, who called you then?
One of my employees, or I shouldn't say my employees, one of my ex-employees called me and said, John, because he had just got a notice from the Kenosha Police Department that the place was on fire, because the alarm went off. So he got notified because the alarm. It was about 10:30 in the evening on a Monday night. And so my wife and I hopped in the car, and we live in Pleasant Prairie. We're going down 22nd Avenue going north. And all we could see was clouds and clouds of smoke as we're approaching. They were working on 22nd Avenue road work. So that was an issue. So I had to, do some finagling to get where I wanted to be, because the roads were closed because of the fire and the roads were closed because of the construction. But we got there, and about 10:30 that night, we stayed till about 2 in the morning and just watched it burn. It was awful, awful. Yeah.
Sad way to...
You see a 109-year-old business just going down, and where my family ran the business for 103 of those 109 years, and still my building. I had a lot of, personal things still in that building, that were related to the store,
Okay.
All gone.
And did you do any of the cleanup? Did you try to salvage anything from the building, or was it because it was another business, it was up to them to salvage whatever they
Yeah,
could?
I would have had the opportunity, but everything was either water damaged or burnt, and the roof collapsed to the upstairs floor, and that floor collapsed to the downstairs floor, and it was a mess. Yeah. You got to wonder, why, they looted and they burned, and for what purpose. But
So that's how your family's business of over 100 years
yes,
came to a close.
yes.
Well, thank you for talking to me today, and
I
thank you for
appreciate
your story.
Appreciate the opportunity, absolutely.
Thank you.
You bet.